Hello, I am Béatrice Marin. I'm in charge of doctoral education in the University of Reims Champagne-Ardenne. And I'm glad to introduce Alexander Hasgall, who is head of the Council for Doctoral Education of European University Association. EUA CDE makes an important contribution for doctoral development and the development of research training in Europe at the moment and in the future. Alexander Hasgall will present to us the role of doctorate within research in Europe. And sir, thank you to be here among us, and we listen to you.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. So I was thinking I will walk a little bit on this stage, because being here I certainly will eat very good food and drink good champagne, so I said I should do something healthy and have a little walk. So thank you very much. So now let's, well, yeah, so the role of the doctorate within research in Europe. So I have a very big topic, so I will go maybe a little bit beside what was talked, because I will not focus on climate warming, climate change, climate crisis, or how we want to talk it, but I want, because of course we have here a lot of early stage researchers, of students, talk about the doctorate, and while I would say it plays actually a very key and pivotal role in research in Europe. And to start, I'm saying where I'm coming from, and usually it's not always the best rhetorics, because I know you don't want to hear who I am, but you want to hear about the topic, but I will be short. So CDE is part of the European University Association. We are the biggest university network association in Europe. EUA has 800 members, CDE has 240, now until 217. We are working on conferences, workshops, focus groups. We are really looking on one hand into the very concrete questions which are related to the doctorate in Europe, but also into the broader policy issues, which of course the topics we discuss today are in. We are in the policy dialogue. We also do service and research, and we will see a lot of our documents, also some I will mention, on our website. So I'm coming from the humanities, and as a humanities person, I of course always bore people with history at the beginning. But I think it's quite interesting, because I wanted to say, what is actually the doctorate? Because, and when did it start? So the doctorate is, as you may know, actually the oldest degree starting in the medieval university, and the doctorate started as something actually very kind of into an oral tradition. So it was not about doing research, about writing a book. It was about talking, and this looks probably very familiar for you. Some doctoral candidates talking, people more or less listening, and here you see this sand watch. So this idea of my test in 3 minutes is not so new, and I think there is kind of the French championships of my thèse en 180 secondes. So of course wishing a lot of luck to the candidates from these universities. Here's another picture, actually a little bit later, from the 18th century. This is actually also a doctoral dissertation defense. I don't know if you organize it the same way here, but as you see, it's a mixer actually or it's actually a very symbolic activity where roles are clear. Also this idea of being public, so seeing the doctorate not as something private, but as a public actually performance. However, of course, now in the last 200 years, it has changed a lot. So from some exercise where you show your competence of explaining an argument into to show the ability to conduct and commit research. And here you will find two actually doctoral theses. The first one on the left was legal thesis, which is probably the first one which was published in the University of Berlin, beginning of the 19th century in law. And this is, of course, the famous thesis of Marie Sklodowska-Curie, which also led then to the Nobel Prize. So you see, a thesis can lead to very high degrees. So what we see now in the last years is this understanding. On one hand, you can talk in the beginning, then to show you can do research, led to an understanding, and this is actually a graph of Eurodoc, which is the Association of Doctoral Candidates in Europe, which shows that the doctorate is actually doing research, which you will see left top, but it's much more. Doctorate nowadays can be considered as an activity which, yes, research is still in the center. So it's maybe a bit misleading, because now it looks the same, research is the same like interpersonal skills, so research is in the center, but research leads to much more. So this is maybe a message I always want to say to people who are doing the doctorate. As a doctoral candidates, you have actually a lot of competences you are maybe not even aware of. And very often it's not only through a dedicated skills training, but just by doing a doctorate. You get interpersonal skills because you communicate, you get interdisciplinary skills, for instance, if you are here in such a room or you are mobile and so on. In the last 20 years as well, there has been this and I don't want, it's a bit too technical, but this tendency to establish, for instance, doctoral schools, so to more structure the doctorate, so from a more individual activity to a more collective one, and we just, based on some key documents, which I can then recommend you if you are really interested, and the last one I will talk, which is a new vision paper we developed about the future of the doctorate in research. So how is the doctorate organized now in Europe? So it's very much based on a diversity, you will see, and I'm sure if you have been mobile, if you have gone to different places, you will see this diversity about diverse organization. You have institutions where the doctorate is organized in programs, others have centralized doctoral school, others have both. Some institutions have credit, some not, different admission criteria. We have different kinds of doctorate now, for instance, actually the traditional doctorate, which you still have in most cases, but here in France you have also doctorate, which I forgot the name in French, about the public, where you can evaluate your professional experiences, so more professional doctorates. We have now a big discussion about different kind of how to make defenses digital, what consists of a doctorate, different funding conditions, different incomes. Doctoral candidates do now a lot, so a lot is done doing research, but plenty of activities, like for instance going to my thesis in 3 minutes, and also very different skills trainings. However, we have a third understanding in Europe what a doctorate is. So first, doctorate is that research is the base of doctoral education, and I will talk about that. It's key. The idea that the doctorate is a transformation phase, and I will also repeat this later, where you start as a student and then become an independent researcher. And when we, as you may have heard, I don't use the topic doctoral students or PhD students, because the candidate's term may make it actually nicer or more clearer to understand that we are in a transition phase. And you are at a different stage when you start your doctorate than when you give your thesis to your university. And also, then a shared understanding of the institutional responsibility of the university. So having a doctoral school, as we have here, having people at the university who support doctoral candidates, bringing supervisor, administration, doctoral candidates together, and also shared understanding about the importance of supervision, so that the le directeur de thèse, or the mentor, or as they say in Portugal, the orientador, which is a topic a term I like, All these are important parts, and also that you can learn how to be a good supervisor. So, so the question is, what are the research as the foundation of doctoral education and doctoral education as the foundation of research? What does it mean actually? And here, by the way, this is a picture talking about history. I like it, from the University of Basel, and it shows here actually a doctoral candidate going to a thesis defense. You see this at the different clothes, and I like this image because it also shows this idea that being a doctoral candidate is something a bit different than the other roles within a university. They are different than professors, different as students, and as that, it's also worth to discuss more what it means to be in this transition phase. So, first of all is, we can talk, there are two outcomes of the doctorate. First, the doctoral researchers. So doing a doctorate means you will have a person who will go out of the university as a full researchers. Now we have a lot of discussion now in Europe about the postdoc, what it means, but however, the key idea of doctorate is producing, if we use that word, of a researcher. Secondly, producing research, and this is very important. And I saw just very shortly these posters, and I'm really looking forward to this poster session, because these are also outcomes of the doctorate, the research that are produced. And doctoral candidates have a central role now in Europe within research and academia. When you look into research project application or research funding, a lot of part of the funding goes actually to doctoral candidates, and also a significant portion of the scientific advancement itself would not be possible without their work and input. So there are some research saying sometimes in some national context or institutional context, up to 40% of all research is actually done by doctoral candidates. So we need really to value their research contribution. Then, as I said, this transition from being a student to becoming an independent researcher, and here you have the different degrees. So their role actually also of connecting two different areas. On one hand, this idea that doctoral candidates are researchers, but at the same time they have a degree, so they get kind of a university education degree. So in some kind of, we can consider doctorate as a point actually between or a bridge between the university who provides degrees and the area of research which is invested in developing new ideas or reflecting certain ideas. They do different activities. So on one hand, they do research, and we did some survey which showed about 80% of the time of doctoral researchers is dedicated to research, but at the same time there are plenty of other areas which covers the whole circle. So most, or in many cases, if you want to do a doctorate, already in the beginning you need to develop a proposal, which is already part of the research circle. You need to deal with data, you need to curate data, so data management is part of the doctorate. You need to communicate, you need to publish. So the whole area of research is in, and a lot of this is what we would call nowadays soft skills, so skills which are not always so clearly linked to research, and also a lot of key policy issues of European universities, open science, research assessment, are connected to the doctorate. And what we see today, the climate question, the sustainability question, is connected to early stage researchers. We saw this here. So if you want to tackle climate change, you cannot just say, I only look into the key PIs of a project, but you need also see what the candidates are doing. Okay, so let's improvise. This is also a skill you should have. So What I would say is that when we talk about the doctorate, is the doctoral candidates can be considered to a certain degree as bridge builders. So this is actually the next slide. So let's go to my bridge builders. Yes, back. So on one hand, there are bridge builders between education and research, as I meant. There are bridge builders, and we talked now a lot about interdisciplinarity in the first talk, and I completely agree about the importance of interdisciplinarity. On the other hand, of course, we need also rigor in the scientific discipline. So it was, I remember, I studied philosophy and history, so, and I always tried to be interdisciplinary, but it was sometimes a bit challenging because as a philosopher, I love to question concepts. So when we had historical seminars, we started to talk. I always told them, yeah, but first we need to talk about what you want to talk, and the historians hated me. So the different disciplinary cultures are also important, but at the same time, we have a lot of interdisciplinary approach, and at the same time, and I think this is very specific to the doctorate and how doctoral schools work nowadays, where you have research ethics and integrity training. It would be interesting how it is in these universities. This connection between the ethical, the social, and technological dimension of research. So we are going to have tomorrow this session about AI, and nowadays nobody can say, and I was thinking, should I start with a big talk about ChatGPT, because that's everybody thinking about now. But what we see nowadays is this is not only a technical issue. It's an ethical issue, it's a political issue, it's a social issue, it's an issue related to democracy, to access, and much more. And if we want to tackle this issue, we need places where people come together and discuss, where disciplines come together and discuss, but where we have also maybe the 3-4 years together to approach. And this is maybe also a key contribution of the doctorate to research in Europe is time, that the doctorate can be considered a phase where there is also time to develop yourself, which you may not always have if you are a more senior researcher. At the same time, serve as ambassadors between academia and society. So in many countries, and I guess the same in France, about 80–90% or sometimes even 95% of doctoral graduates will not become full university professors. And it's always a challenge, because when you love to do something, and most early stage researchers like to do research, it's a challenge sometimes to transition to other areas. But at the same time, the fact that you have people who have spent several years of research, this is what nowadays also private businesses need, which museums need, which public institutions need. So this ambassador issue is that everybody who does a doctorate and goes to another area can tell what is doing research. And while indeed researchers are not always the best decision makers, but it's important that decision makers and researchers work at the same time on a daily basis. And this is thanks to the doctorate, which gives people a 4–5 year experience in research, which they can translate in other places. And there are also some research showing, actually, if you have a doctoral graduate in your research team in a company, the performance of the whole team increases, because then you have access to the up-to-date research. Same time, the doctoral schools bring together these key stakeholders, if we use this term, within the universities, their professors, the administration, their doctoral candidates, the external partners which the university collaborate, often within a whole doctorate. All this come together, and there is this, I think, a little bit kitschy idea of it needs a village to get to one doctorate, but it's not completely wrong, because a lot of people are usually engaged, even though at the same time, and I remember from my doctorate, you feel often very alone when you're doing this, but in reality, that's not the case. Well, that you feel, yes, it's the case, but not it's necessarily like this, and at the same time, and we talked also before about this idea of the doctorate as motor of internationalization and collaboration. One of the key terms we have nowadays about internationalization and collaboration is co-tutelle. So it's a term even from France, and I know everybody involved in co-tutelle, it can be sometimes traumatizing because it's a lot of bureaucracy involved sometimes and a lot of work, but at the same time, it's this idea that you could be in a university and have a supervisor in another university and spend 6 months somewhere. This makes actually not only the research better, but it brings also institutions together. And I think in France, I don't know the newest numbers, about 25–30% of all doctoral candidates are abroad. In other countries, it's up to 50%. So there is no other degree in the university which is so international about as a doctorate. And I think there is a lot to explore about this. So to end, I just want to be, and I talked a bit long, and I also want to congratulate to your time management. I'm a Swiss person, but it's great how everything is punctual here. I wanted to talk about a survey we produced, a vision paper we produced where we looked, based on this foundation of research, what are the 10 key paths, the key 10 topics we need to talk about? For that, we see doctorate nowadays has some external and internal drivers we need to look at, which actually drive, so the extrinsic, the digitalization, the SDGs, we are talking later, the role of exchange with society, equality, diversity, inclusion, academic freedom, these are drivers related to societal dynamics. We have internal drivers like diverse institutional dynamics, quality assurance, skills development, supervision and funding, which is very specific for the doctorate itself. So being very short, I wanted to, each of the next slide will have a little bit opportunities and challenges and some ideas how to go forward. So first, and I will not explain everything, is this digitalization. And here it's important, digitalization, it's not only using Zoom meetings. Digitalization impacts pretty much everything we do, and it impacts us now much more than it impacted us 6 months ago. I could even have asked ChatGPT make a presentation for today. I'm sure this presentation would be extremely boring because everything ChatGPT does at the moment is boring, but we see that things are developing at the moment. So we need a broad approach. We need to look into the different dimensions, as I talked before, but at the same time we need to see the challenge. For instance, the whole mental health issue, which has become isolation, which become important, digital divides. Secondly, the SDGs, we talk so much about this. Here it's important to understand SDGs as a holistic framework. It's climate change, but it's also question of inclusion, equality, and everything else connected. And being such a diverse degree, and I will talk later, we still have not all sectors in society equally represented in the doctorate. We need to understand this question as a more holistic framework. But again, we need also to be cautious. The doctorate is about a lot is about basic research, what you do and we need a lot of basic research to address the big topics. And do I have still 2 minutes or? Okay. So this is important. Actually, exchange with society, I talked a lot about this. Equality, diversity, inclusion. We need to address inequalities also within doctoral education, and for this you can ask some questions. Academic freedom, a topic which hasn't been talked so much, but we have challenges in Europe exactly when it comes to questions like academic freedom and also on a global way. And doctoral candidates are particularly vulnerable because they're in the beginning of their careers and not always have the best network. We need to talk about that, or you need to talk about that because there is no time for me now. Diverse institutional dynamics, this is more technically, but we need even if we have different kind of doctorate, maintaining research as the center is key. Skills for purpose, not having skills, or I have now 50 skills and do my doctorate for 15 years. We need to understand which skills need to be trained, which skills are in it, and especially we need to be aware of, it's not about adding a skill, it's being aware what you can do as a doctoral candidate. And I'm sure you can do much more. So when you ever will apply for a job, really think about it, read about it, discuss about it, what you can actually, what did you learn in these 3, 4, 5 years, or 7, whatever, of the doctorate you had. Supervision, key, and not a solo act. The supervisor has a key role. However, it's not always, maybe not everything can be done by the supervisor. And you have here also a doctoral school. I'm sure there will be supportive here to support you in all kind issues. And then the end, funding, and this is the longest text because it's extremely complicated in a way that we have such a diversity in Europe, but we need to find ways also to fund the doctoral candidates appropriately for this endeavor. At the end, inviting you to a beautiful place, to Finland, where we are having our next annual meeting. Topic is communication in doctoral education. So exactly as I meant, communication becomes more important. We love to have doctoral candidates. We love to have university people. And with that, thank you very much. And please write me an email or look me at Twitter. Thanks.
Thank you for this presentation. I think it's very important for our PhD students and colleagues to realize the place of doctorate within research in Europe. So thank you very much. Do you have some questions for Alexander Hasgall? No question?
I have a question, Alexander. Is it possible to actually normalize the time scale of a PhD study all over Europe? Because we have 3 years in France, 4 years in Belgium, 5 years in... Is that an issue or not?
Yes, it's a big question. So, well, first of all, when we talk about time, what do we talk about? In some countries, especially in Eastern Europe, about 80% of all candidates are part-time doing it. So this is connected to the funding I addressed. So of course, if you're doing it part-time, it takes longer. Then there is a whole discussion about what is the doctorate. So is the doctorate really you do your research in 3 years or 2 years even, but usually 3 years, don't look left or right? Or is it kind of a phase where you will have much more also additional training, where you are mobile, because we know when you are mobility, always takes a couple of months more. Then we have the disciplinary question. So we have big differences in disciplines. So I'm wondering if it's, no, so first of all, no, I don't think it's possible. I'm also not sure that we should do it, because we then would get into a very big discussion. Should we do it like them? Should we do it like them? Or should we do it like them? We have this diverse feedback. I think what can be helpful, because often it's considered, well, we have it maybe too long because of this and this problem which arise. And here maybe mutual learning, exchange, looking how they do in other places can be helpful. But as a CD as well, we always advocate for certain flexibility, because the individual situations is different. And for instance, if you have very, very strict timelines or deadlines for your doctorate, first of all, people will not, for instance, collaborate, but then people will, there are very sometimes individual reasons why it takes longer, so certain flexibility can be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a bit pessimistic question about burning out of PhD student. It's not a secret that sometimes it can be extremely stressful. I'm sharing my office with 3 PhD students, and none of them want to stay in science after. How we can help on the European level? And do you know any statistic about how many PhD students stayed in science after defense?
Yes, thank you very much. Now the topic of mental health has become, I remember when I started this job 5 years ago, it was still a topic which has been seen in some countries in Europe as an urgent topic, especially in some more northern countries. But what we see nowadays, it's a topic everywhere in Europe. This comes up. So yes, we have a big challenge related to mental health. Now, and this should not sound like an excuse. We have, of course, a huge societal questions, especially after COVID, related to mental health. And we often use the term, we have a mental health crisis. Now, based on what we discussed this morning about crisis, and sometimes crisis is not always the best way to portray it. I don't know if it's so helpful, but we still need to we still don't know so much why specifically the doctorate has these numbers. Is it more related that people are also more aware of? But one point we see is indeed related to the funding in some countries, that it may, so if you have a funding for 3 years, but you know it takes 4 years, you have an issue. It's related to the academic system itself, where this topic of pressures related to time, to getting results, somehow, even if the doctorate is maybe not so strong than in other areas, you feel this. So this these career issues. So on one hand, you do a doctorate because you want to do it, but then we know that the chances to stay in academia is really low, which may also lead to this kind of insecurities. So I would say it's a mixer between more societal question, which we urgently need to tackle, the question about what can we expect from doctoral candidates, so too much pressure to provide this, to provide this. So of course, issues like the assessment system, like journal impact factor, and so has become a really issue. The people feel I need to publish, 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 or perish. Now we may have become into a situation of publish and perish, so even no exit. But at the same time, we also need to take care that we don't get into a self-optimization trap. So even though I like to walk, I don't have one of these watches which count my steps, because I realize they just stress me out. So it takes out the fun of walking. So we need to discuss what can we expect from doctoral candidates, what we cannot expect, and really communicate and work, and it's a role also for us as an institution, how to deal with this uncertainty.
Another question?
Thanks for your presentation, Laurie Hamelin from the Federal University of Toulouse. It's questions and comments. When you spoke about digitalization, it reminded me a thought I had during COVID, where PhD defenses were sort of democratized because everyone had access to it, and that's fantastic because you have 3 years or 4 years of work summarized in 45 minutes. And I was wondering if there could not be some European initiative to, I don't know, to ensure PhD defenses are online. That's just a thought, but something. And then I was also wondering from the other side, so from the PhD supervisor side, you have this brilliant idea, you get the funding, and then you advertise your PhD position, and then you have a hard time to recruit because maybe in your universities the salary are not as good as your neighbor in the north, for example. And I was wondering if that's also something you're thinking about. Should there not be a sort of standard?
What?
if there should be, I don't know if I speak, a standard across Europe for salaries of PhD students or purchasing power that gives them in the country they are. It's just ideas, but that sometimes makes it hard to recruit candidates. And then a third point, I was thinking, I mean, that's from my personal experience. I had a PhD in Denmark, and then after, okay, did postdoc there, then I went to Poland, and now I'm in France. And we encourage young people to move, because that's good on their CV and for career. But it's also really hard, I think, because you never have any roots anywhere. And I'm wondering also if that's something that is being taught on how to give some sort of support for these people that we not force, but encourage very strongly to move around, but then there is always a bit of loss in these shiftings from one country to another.
Okay, so first about this thesis, the digital thesis defense. Of course, there are both. For some, it has been great, especially if you're maybe in a more remote place and you're not forced to travel, or for others, it's the opposite. I mean, they dream for years to be somewhere. I remember I was actually, shortly after COVID in Italy, I was invited to talk at the ceremony, and I saw the people, and everybody was so happy to get this hat they got and throw it in the roof and make a photo. So here I would say, it seems there are both needs, and what COVID made, now every university has the technical meaning to do digital thesis defense. Sometimes there are legal obstacles and so on, but at the same time, we should not get into a situation of fight. I think it's the same when we talk about sustainability. A lot of people would be actually like to think about reduced carbon footprint, but are panicking, oh no, now I will not be allowed anymore to travel, so I ignore this topic. While for others, it's the opposite, to say, no, we need to really restrict it. So having flexibility and a way to discuss what is fit for purpose. You mean more to make it seen? Okay. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I don't think that now as an association we would do it. I think this could be something really I would suggest to the academic community. Okay, I'm also part of it, to develop this kind of ways. I think you have in some disciplines some intents to organize an overview. Of course, it's easier if you have a small discipline where everybody knows everybody, but I think having this kind of platform would be good. Secondly, about the funding, shortly. Standard size is of course quite challenging because it's of course a funding issue, and now we have the European Commission here, so I think there will be a new framework program, and I think we all understand that how important it is to develop, especially with this challenge, to have research and to have the right funding in it, so to enable also the institution to provide the funding. We know that there are really great actually funding instruments, so now we need, and this is actually more for the member states, if we to be correct, to fund actually the institution to be providing this, because as I said about our vision paper at the end, we have a big challenge that in some countries you get 20 times more working for big company than for institution, and here we need the funding here. But this is probably not a legislative question, it's a question you cannot just have a law, this needs to be, because this would lead to a risk we see if you would say in some places, well, every doctoral candidates need to have, I don't know, 3,000 euros a month, but you have only 100,000 euros of funding, then you would have 30 instead of 300. So the funding question play a role here. Now the third question, could you repeat? Yes. Yes, again, in all this point, I think we need flexibility because we have a huge diversity here in Europe about the local contexts. And here I would say what we need and what we try to work on also as CD is to learn each other. How can you provide support? We know the mental health situation. There's been a research in the UK of international doctoral candidates, particularly during COVID, was much worse. Because of course they have no family, they have nobody they can go to. So as a university, you need, for instance, having to be aware of it and to discuss how you can address this. But this, as everything, that's why I started with my slide about diversity. All of this cannot be done top-down with a rule, because the local contexts are different, the funding contexts are different, the cultures, and also the needs are different. It's often, then I'll finish with that, often I get the question, should you not have a rule that a supervisor seats doctoral candidates every 2 weeks? Now, I saw my supervisor every 3 months, but this was great because I felt, okay, I spend with her 2 hours, she gives me good questions, then I have 3 months to think about that. That's great. I know for others it's important every week, and it's different if you make philosophy or you are in a lab where every experiment endures a week. So I think the important here is we have a diversity in Europe, but this gives a lot of opportunities, especially to candidates, to institutions, to really think what's the best for us in this different context, and not looking for one-fits-it-all approach, which I think would really weaken the richness and the opportunities to have, because since you as a doctoral candidates, you will go in very different directions. So the doctorate must be a place where you can be prepared for very different directions.
Thank you. Maybe we have time for a last question. Hélène? Yes, we have time. No? No question?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I had a question about the private funded doctorate programs that exist in France. You talked about it, it's called CIFRE, and I'm part of such a program. And I was wondering what's your position about it. It could raise questions about freedom of research, in my case, hopefully not. But is it planned to be implemented in other countries in Europe, and under what conditions? Thank you.
So, and this really for the records, I don't know this program, so I cannot say anything. I mean, maybe I should, and I will read about this, so I cannot comment on this specific program. So I try really to give a general statement about this kind of collaborative doctorates between private sector and universities. And here we see number 5, and again, not connected to any specific project, question of academic freedom. And if I had more time and not start to talk too much at the beginning, I would talk about that. Too much directionalism is, of course, a danger for academic freedom. And when we speak a lot now about SDGs, we have here also a dilemma. On one hand, we need solution to address specific question, but the quality of research and innovation comes from asking the basic questions, and the doctorate is the place where basic questions are asked. So we need it doesn't matter if it's who funds it, who organizes it, this principle of a curiosity-driven research as doctorate must remain, and research is the foundation. On a more practical approach, we did a project some years ago about the collaborative doctorate. It's really important to be really also agree before and make everybody involved agree who has which role. So a private sector, a public sector, a third partner have a very useful and important role in collaborating, because you can have a lot of insight, you can learn a lot, and also prepare your own career by collaborating. But of course, the private sector is not giving you a doctoral degree. And the doctoral degree is from the university and is following the principle of academia, because it's an academic title. So, and here it's very clear that all our principles We look at institutional autonomy, academic freedom, curiosity-driven research remains in any kind of doctorate, whoever organizes or finances it.
Thank you. So thank you again, Alexander, and we can continue to exchange during lunch, of course. So you can applaud Mr. Hasgall.